Hello all. So I want to talk about trauma. I want to add a little bit to the conversation that is out there. Thanks for tuning in. So one of the pieces that I feel like is obvious, but we don't often think about, would be the fact that trauma affects all of us differently. There are an infinite number of responses to trauma that could be happening even in the same person or in different people, how we're not all alike. And as much as I appreciate Pete Walker's structure that we can impose onto this idea of responses to trauma, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, I think we have to be careful not to get too hemmed in and think in terms of, especially when we identify, oh, this is the tendency that I have, is to go to this particular response, realize that it can vary, even in the same individual, especially in time, especially as different sorts of traumas occur in time. And certainly if you have the same trauma affecting different people, their responses are going to be different. Adaptation is really the name of the game. Partly why I enjoy talking about BDNF on this channel is that is the closest thing physiologically that I can find to capturing this idea of what happens with trauma. Adaptation has to occur, and thinking in terms of things that are going to help with the adaptation, with the rebuilding of the neurons, restructuring, even cleaning up the debris that goes on physiologically speaking. I mean, that's all important. But the other thing we have to think about would be the underlying susceptibility that predisposes people to experience trauma in different ways. Let's go back and think about the saber-toothed tiger days, when we were a group of people, a tribe, living somewhere, and in that group of people, confronted with such scenarios like the saber-toothed tiger wandering into camp, certain adaptations had to happen as a group. And so when you look at developmentally the kinds of temperaments and personalities in the group, it makes sense to look at the research that shows that you have about 80% of one type. I'm going to describe them as the impulsive, less cautious, willing, like the Evel Knievels of the world, to jump, to run, to throw the spear and engage in battle with the saber-toothed tiger for the sake of the tribe, right? You need a certain number of those people, and you're going to probably need more of those people if you're talking numbers, because more of them are going to find themselves in danger in a good way, but for the sake of the tribe, right? You're going to lose more because they're less cautious. Then you have another group, the 20%, 15 to 20% is what the numbers show. I mean, the research shows that has less of that trait, less of the impulsivity, lack of caution, go for it kind of mentality, and more of the pause to check, cautious. We're going to think this over, perhaps on every level and in multiple dimensions, before proceeding. Those guys and gals ended up being historically the advisors, the wisdom people, the thinkers in a group that planned how to adapt the strategy of going after the saber-toothed tiger. Perhaps they were also some of the inventors, the creative thinkers, because they're going to come up with, or they're more likely to come up with strategies for how to take down the saber-toothed tiger. They're probably not going to be the ones that are in battle engaging the saber-toothed tiger, because the tribe needs them to be thinking about how to proceed in the future, how to come up with new weapons, so that instead of throwing the spear, we launch the spear from a bow or a catapult or all sorts of things that they're going to come up with for the sake of the tribe. So again, you need that, but it's a different set of strengths and weaknesses. The strengths being able to think in depth and consider infinite numbers of possibilities of things that might happen, and very often accurately make fewer mistakes because of that thinking through things fully before engaging, the pause to check. However, that group maybe doesn't fit as well in the running after the saber-toothed tiger group. In terms of trauma, what ends up happening would be, if in the smaller group, the minority of the pause to check, they have more sensitive nervous systems because they're more predisposed to have firing in the brain space and thinking of things in depth. In that context, they're more quickly going to get to a space where they're over aroused because of all this in-depth processing, their brain functioning as one of the things that can stress them out. They're going to be more predisposed to anxiety. They're going to be more predisposed to depression and susceptible to it. So given that scenario, if we think about addressing the treatment of trauma, let's say one or both groups have cPTSD, well, first of all, you're going to have a predisposition to get cPTSD in the group that is more easily reaches over arousal because of the way they process and their nervous systems process things. Less so in the impulsive group, which on some levels can be good as a group when you think holistically. But knowing that there are distinctions in how, in the response to trauma, especially in time, the treatment and the way we address it changes. The needs in terms of addressing and processing trauma is different in the two sets of people. And so I think we have to realize that a lot of times when we think in terms of coming up with solutions to how to address trauma, it's not one size fits all. And if we have something that's not working with a particular person, sometimes backing up and going, well, maybe this thing that I'm doing, this treatment that I'm doing, works in a certain group of people and needs to be fine-tuned in a different group. It varies. That has been my experience both as a practitioner and as a person having, we all have traumatic experiences, and in processing and dealing with some of those experiences, there's tremendous variability. And that's really important and simple and probably a no-brainer, but very often not addressed. So that's all I really had to say. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate all your supports. And I would love to hear your comments in terms of your experience with how your own trauma and how that has manifested. What's your experience been with your underlying personality type and how that has shaped your experience of trauma? I would love to hear that. Audio.